Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory, and in this video, this is a continuation of my top 50 favorite board games of all time. These are games number 30 up to 21. Let's get started. As always, first things first, if you enjoy what you see here on the channel, consider subscribing. We really do appreciate it. Also, you'll find down in the show notes below a link to our Patreon page where you can donate to the channel. We have one whole Patreon so far that is currently donating to the channel. And a quick reminder with that, all the money that is donated through our Patreon goes towards upgrading the quality of our videos here on the channel and helps raise the money that is necessary for us to host fundraising events twice a year. Some of you may know we do host 24-hour marathons. All the money is donated to the Children's Hospital, and we do use that Patreon money to help schedule, coordinate, and run those fundraising events. So every dollar really helps with that. Without further ado, let's get into my number 30 favorite board game of all time. My number 30 was number 37 last year, staying strong on the list in the 30s, and it just continues to climb. A game I don't get played a ton because it is a two-player only game, but this game is Raptor. When I do table it with me and one opponent, Raptor is a lot of fun. Every time I think about Raptor, I think about putting it immediately into my top 50 favorite games of all time. Just not really too sure where it's going to fall each and every year, but this year it is number 30. In this game, one player takes on the role of the scientists, the other player takes on the role of the velociraptors, and you are going after an asymmetric goal to win the game. The scientists are trying to capture or take down enough of the raptors to win the game, and the velociraptors, you have a mother raptor and a bunch of baby velociraptors on the map, and you are trying to tactically maneuver those raptors around the board to try to get away from the scientists and get them off of the board to escape the scientists. So the raptors can also take down the scientists and kill them off to try to dwindle them off the board so it's easier to escape from the scientists. So the raptors have some actions that are involved in that. I really like the mechanism in Raptor. Each player has an asymmetric deck of cards that are different from one another. All the cards are numbered from 1 to 9. You draw a hand of 3 cards, and those are the cards you can use on your turn. Each player plays a card secretively, simultaneously down onto the board, and then you flip them up at the same time. And after flipping those cards, the way it works is the card with the higher number on it gets to act first, and the difference of the values between the two cards is how many basic actions that player gets. So for example, if I played an 8 and the opponent plays a 3, the difference is 5. So me playing down the 8, I would get to go first because I played the higher card, and the difference of that 8 and 3, I would get 5 basic actions to do with either my raptors or scientists, depending on what player I am playing. And then the other player, they don't get to do any basic actions because they played the lower value card, but they get to do the special effect that is printed on the card. Each one of the cards has a unique special effect. Sometimes the special effects are even better than the basic actions. So you're really trying to play with your own mind and your opponent's mind on what card are they going to play when. You might want some basic actions because the basic actions are maneuvering around the board or doing like a basic attack onto your opponent. So they're very basic actions, but sometimes you need those basic action points to move your pieces around the board to try to maneuver away from your opponent. But sometimes you want to try to play the lower card out of the two because you get a very powerful special effect. You don't get to act first, you act second, but you get a powerful effect after that higher card player plays their basic actions. So I really love trying to guess what your opponent's going to play and trying to play the most effective card you can secretively. You both flip them face up, see what happens. What's also really unique with the card play in this game is that every time you play an action card, it goes to your discard pile, and that stays revealed face up in your discard pile, splayed out, so your opponent can see exactly what cards you've played. You can see exactly what cards they've played throughout the rounds, so you can guess at what cards are left in their hand or what cards they might be drawing into. So that really helps you narrow down your guess at which value cards they have left to even draw into and play with. A ton of fun. Raptor is definitely a game that every time I think of just playing a two-player game, immediately Raptor comes to my mind for that. So that is Raptor. All right, my number 29 game was number 18 last year, and it made a huge splash, I believe back in 2023, so it's been about 1.5 to 2 years when this game first came out, made a huge splash in the board game hobby and got a lot of buzz, and now it did get its first expansion, but it's kind of dying off a little bit, but that game is Revive. Revive is fantastic. I really enjoy it a lot at all player counts. And pretty much what this is, it's a post-apocalyptic game where you've been underground for 5,000 years during an ice age. The entire Earth was covered in ice. Humankind went down beneath the surface to survive for 5,000 years, and now the Earth is slowly thawing out. So now you can resurface and explore the land to see what you find. In this game, it's got a lot of things going on, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of my favorite things here. Not enough time to explain everything, unfortunately, but pretty much it does have that sense of exploration. What drives this game is simple card play. You basically have a clan of people that are represented on cards in your hand, and every turn you can play a card. That person will gather you resources. Depending on where you play it on your player board, that'll tell you what different resources you can get. You can also explore the board to try to find technologies that you can slot into your player board, so every time you play a character to that location on your player board, that technology triggers and gives you another bonus or a special effect with that technology. And then also, you can kind of see here, I'll put a screenshot on the screen as well, but you've got a player board here that has a bunch of different unique technologies that is separate from your main board, that you are trying to build these settlements in different locations to go up on these tracks, these technology tracks with your discs. And when you get to a certain part on the technology track with a disc, or sometimes it takes two discs that are intersecting or bypassing each other to unlock that zone, you get another technology that you can slot into that, and now you have that special ability or that effect just for you for the rest of the game. So it's cool how you are not only exploring the land, trying to get to these different regions before other players to build these settlements to get these bonuses, slot in these different technologies to make yourself unique. Not only are you unique with the technologies that you get, but you have a starting race or a starting hero that has specific special abilities that are on that hero as well. So this game is all about feeling unique from your opponents. Everything you do, everything you choose to do will make yourself feel different than the other players around the board, and you're just trying to get these victory points in different ways. And I don't know exactly what it is, but you're also trying to find these ancient alien burial sites where you can get these alien brains and collect those, and depending on the number of the different types of alien artifacts you have, that'll score you a multiplier of victory points at the end of the game also. But what I really like in Revive is it all comes down to playing a simple card on your turn to do an action with it and trying to go after different victory point goals faster and better than your opponents can do. So that is Revive. All right, my number 28 game is another brand new game to the list, and a brand new game that was released in 2024, and it just took me by storm. I had one of the viewers here on the channel recommend this to me in one of the comments of one of her videos, and on its surface, I would have never thought I would enjoy a simple or another simple tile placement game, but Harmonies I really, really enjoyed. As you can see here, debuting at number 28 on the list. In Harmonies, yes, it's simple tile placement, but it really reminds me of Azul. If you've played Azul before, that is a simple tile placement game that I really enjoyed for many years, but unlike in Azul, Harmonies, it just has a little bit more moving parts going on with it. In Harmonies, you have these different selections in the center of the table, essentially these little zones that have 3 tiles in each zone, and on your turn, you can gather any one of those 3 tiles in any one of those zones and take them over to you to place on your player board, and you're trying to do so to configure these different environments for essentially these animal cards that you can pick up to score victory points with the animals. They like to live in various environments, so you're really trying to select the animals that will go best with where you're placing your tiles on your board, and it's definitely a spatial puzzle because the different configurations of the tiles, they will essentially build out your own little environment on your board, and depending on the exact orientation of the different tiles that you build out into these environments, that will be able to host these different animals, and these different animals will want to live there. And essentially, when you can complete a specific tactical configuration of your tiles that will gel well with that animal, you get to place a cube on one of your tiles that signify that that animal has now moved into that environment and is now habitating that environment. So that's pretty much all Harmonies is. It's just simple tile placement. I like how it plays very quickly. It's kind of a family plus weight game. It's not really a true family weight because it's a little bit harder for younger kids to understand, but if you have kids that are a little bit older or into their teenage years, plays well with adults. This game really sings with that because there are a little bit complicated moving parts with the way scoring works and also the spatial element and spatial awareness to the puzzle that you are forming on your board. But if you can understand that, this game plays very quickly and is very fun every single time, and just kind of make do with what you have. So that is Harmonies. Okay, and my number 27 was number 29 last year, and this is a game that has area control, but it has a twist with the main mechanism. It's a twist on trick-taking, and Brian Boru does it best with that trick-taking element of a game mixed with area control. And that's essentially all this game is. If you like the traditional trick-taking style card games that you grew up with like Hearts or 500 or any of these other games that multi-generations of people are aware of and have played for many years, Brian Boru definitely takes a spin on that. It's essentially trick-taking with cards, but it has a board, and the cards, depending on what suit you're playing, you have to follow the suit. The higher the card, the better the action you get to do with that suit, and the actions are essentially placing these discs on different regions of the board to vie for control over them to try to gain either military might to go up on these like different tracks. There's a marriage track. You're marrying a king and queen or princess and prince to try to get points with that, and the different suits of cards allow you to do different things to try to get toward those goals. So Brian Boru, it's a sleeper hit. It's a game that, yes, some people do talk about it, but it isn't talked about enough for how unique it is. And it isn't solid trick-taking where if somebody in your family is just fantastic at traditional trick-taking that you won't have a chance to win this game. It's nothing like that. This has some trick-taking, but it is a twist enough to it to where it's a little bit more simplified trick-taking, but I love that mixed with the area control elements in this game. It adds a lot of tension with trying to get to these areas before your opponents and trying to throw down enough of your troops and military to take over these regions with that trick-taking element. So I really like it. I'm not a traditional trick-taking type of game player anyway, so I was a little bit hesitant when we first got this game to the table, but every time we've played it and every group we've played it with has enjoyed it. So that is Brian Boru. All right, and my number 26 game was number 19 last year, so falling just a little bit, and this is definitely toward the upper end of a heavier style game. The designer is Vito Lacerda, and if you know anything about Vito Lacerda, you know that most of his games are extremely heavy, but this one is one of his more approachable designs that I would recommend starting with if you have not tried a Vito Lacerda game before, and this game is KANBAN EV. KANBAN EV is the new iteration of KANBAN, so you might have seen the game KANBAN on store shelves for quite some time. There are a couple different versions of KANBAN. KANBAN EV with electric vehicles is the newest iteration of the game and is honestly the most gorgeous presentation for this game also. The artwork, the graphic design work, the ease of knowing which department is where, and just keeping it nice and as simplified as possible. At a glance, you can see where everything is. I think they did a great job with the art and with the graphic design in this game to accompany the gameplay. In KANBAN EV, essentially what you are doing is you are in a warehouse making vehicles. You are gathering designs for vehicles, trying to gather the parts for the vehicles to put into the cars, and then you are sending them on the test track to test them out before you send them off into the production. And you also have your boss that is walking around the show floor. Her name is Sandra, and if you are not completing enough of your training in different departments, you'll get negative victory points for that. Your boss will actually dock you points for that. So it definitely feels like you are essentially at work, but it's a fun type of work. And at the end of each round, you are going to the boardroom to have a meeting with your boss, Sandra, and all the other players. You are literally taking a seat at the table in this boardroom, and you are essentially going over these different goals or these strategy goals that were set out at the beginning of the round. And depending on how many of those goals or how well you completed those goals, you'll get victory points for that during the meeting at the end of each round. So it definitely sounds like you are going to work and you're putting in your 9-to-5 job, clocking in, clocking out, but it's definitely a lot more than just that also. It's a lot of fun. And to quickly go over the main mechanism in this game, this is just simple worker placement. You have one worker that you are sending to whichever department in the warehouse you choose to send them to, and depending on the action location in that department, that'll take either 2 or 3 hours. Some action spots might only take 1 hour of time to go to that location. And by the end of the day, after spending all that time, you're going to the boardroom for your meeting. So that is how that is all justified thematically. And like I said, just a lot of fun. Definitely one of the most thematic games I've ever played. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely give Kanban EV a look. All right, to my number 25 favorite board game of all time is another game that is new to my list. It's not a newer game, it's actually an older game, but new to my list because I've gotten it played a few times over this past year for the very first time, and it is now one of my favorite games ever designed by one of my favorite designers of all time, and that's Alexander Pfister. And this game here, like I said, it's one of his older titles, but a lot of fun to play. This game is Mombasa. Mombasa, again, it's got some area control elements to it, and this is the game that first introduced the same system that is now in his game Blackout Hong Kong, where you have cards that you're doing different actions with that you're putting down in columns in front of you, and depending on which cards are present on the top of each columns, it will tell you what actions you can do and how strong that action is if you have multiples of that same card. So yes, the card play in Mombasa is just like in Blackout Hong Kong, or very similar, but what I really enjoy about this game is that it's got some shares of stocks and some elements of money manipulation going on in this game, along with the area control. You're trying to control these different areas and control these different companies within these areas, and then depending on which areas you control on the board with said company and how many shares of that company of the stock you have in front of you, you multiply that out and it gives you essentially points for the end of the game depending on how well you're doing with that. So I definitely like market manipulation, shares of stock, the different companies that are vying for control over these different regions. And the card play in this game is so simple with that also. There are a few other things going on that I'm not really going to dive into because it is kind of a medium heavy game. It's not a traditional stock market style game, so if you're not really into stock markets, it's not that type of game, but it definitely has a little bit of that money management style mixed in with a Euro game. So if you like Euro games with the stocks and money management and a little bit of area control, then Mombasa is definitely a great game for that. All right, my number 24 game was number 28 last year and is one of the simplest games to teach, one of the simplest games to play that is cooperative that I own on my shelf. And don't let the simplicity fool you, folks. The simplicity, yes, it is there. The art style is a little bit cartoonish and kind of kiddish, but don't let that fool you either, because PALEO is a fantastic cooperative game. And like I said, I'm about to teach the whole game here in like 3 seconds because it's that easy of a game to teach. But essentially all it is there's a deck of cards that have different environments on the backs of them. You shuffle them all out, you deal the entire deck of cards evenly amongst all the players, and then on their turn, they can look at the top 3 cards of their deck and choose which environment they want to visit. Depending on the environment they choose to visit, there's either a lower percentage chance or a higher percentage chance that they'll come across a predator or trying to gather certain types of food. Then you are trying to complete that card for the reward on that card. A lot of the rewards are just gaining different token types that you can place in front of you, different ways to try to take down the predators or complete the cards or complete your mission for those bonuses. One of the other mechanisms I love with this game is that a lot of the cards have a helping hand symbol on the bottom of the card. So if you don't want to complete the card for that reward, you can choose to discard it to use that helping hand to help use your tokens to complete missions for your other players around the table to help them out. So it really feels very cooperative. You're trying to survive the day and trying to survive the nighttime without getting killed off. Your different tribe members getting killed off, you want to try to have them survive. So it takes place during the Paleo Americans, kind of more the Stone Age. So you've got these predators and you're exposed to these predators. You're just essentially trying to survive. And if all of your tribe's people, including yours and your teammates, die, then you lose the game. Then essentially to win the game, you are collecting these cave painting tokens to basically paint about your experiences, and if you can collect 5 of those painting tokens, you win the game. So very, very easy game to play. It's just that one deck of cards that you are dealing out to each of the players, and then visiting these locations to either try to complete the mission yourself or help your teammates complete their mission. So that is PALEO. All right, my number 23 game was number 25 last year, and it is one of my favorite deck building games of all time. Not my favorite, spoilers again, not my favorite, but one of my favorite, and really any iteration of Clank I enjoy. The game is Clank. This is the original box, but like I said, there's many iterations of Clank. There's Clank in Space, there's Clank Legacy, now there's Clank Legacy 2, there's Clank Catacombs, and a bunch of different versions. Just find whatever version suits you best or whatever theme you like best. But essentially at this point, I'm just kind of bundling the whole Clank system into one category. So this is all of the Clank games kind of in one bundle for this spot on my list. But I would think at this point, Clank Catacombs is probably my favorite because it's got a variable board going on, but I still really enjoy the original version of Clank as well. Like I said, it's deck building at its finest. You are purchasing cards to your discard pile, shuffle them in to get new and better cards throughout the game. You're playing these cards to essentially get movement points with these different boot icons to try to send your explorer down through the dungeon, to try to collect relics for victory points, and try to get out of there before the dragon takes you down and kills you, because if the dragon kills you below the surface, you end the game with 0 points. Like the name Clank suggests, you are causing noise as you are delving through the dungeon collecting these relics. So you are putting in these Clank cubes into the dragon bag. So every time the dragon attacks, that you are more likely, the more noise you make, more likely to be drawn to do damage to your characters. So you want to be careful with that. But it's just a ton of fun. Some of the cards, like I said, have boots, so you can travel better through the dungeon. Some of the cards have sword icons on there, so you can take down monsters for gold coins. There's 4 different locations on the board that is a market location that you can buy these different market items to help you on your exploration as well. There's quite a bit going on, but also a simpler game to teach. If you understand other games like Dominion or Star Realms or any other deck builders out there, then those players will be able to grasp Clank very quickly, but it's essentially deck building with a board, but a lot of fun. So I highly, highly recommend Clank. All right, to my number 22 favorite game of all time was number 22 last year, staying in the same exact spot, and is definitively my favorite Eric Lang game of all time. And that might be kind of a hot take, I don't know, because Eric Lang games are highly regarded and a lot of his games are fantastic, but my favorite of the bunch that he has ever designed is Blood Rage. Blood Rage is awesome. Like I say in a lot of the games here, or like you've seen on my list, I like area control quite a bit, but what Blood Rage does, it not only throws a Viking theme into this, which I really like the Viking theme a lot, but it also throws in the mechanism of card drafting, and I really love the heck out of card drafting. Essentially, this game is played over 3 ages. At the beginning of each of the ages, you are drafting cards to your hand. You get to draft 1 card, pass the cards around the table, and as another stack of cards comes your way, you get to draft another card from that stack, and you just go until the cards are empty, and then you have your hand of drafted cards for that round. You are using those cards to upgrade your clan, to recruit monsters to your side of the board so you can have monsters to then put onto the map, and you're trying to vie for these different locations, because every time you choose to pillage a location, you can gain victory points for that. And it's just a lot of fun, not only with the card drafting, trying to gain these special abilities that none of your opponents have, but then to utilize those cards at the best opportune moment to send your figures to the board. And like with most area control games, there's a lot of tension with the area control elements, but also a lot of tension at the beginning of every round with the card drafting to see what kind of cards you can get. There are also cards you can draft that are quest cards that give you unique missions, that if you can complete that mission, you gain victory points for that as well. Yeah, this is just fantastic. If you like card drafting at all, if you like area control at all, this definitely plays and sings extremely well with both of those mechanisms combined. All the mechanisms gel really well together and everything you're doing makes sense. So that is Blood Rage. All right, and real quickly before I get into the last game on today's list, I did want to remind you, if you enjoy the content you see here on the channel, consider subscribing. It helps us out a lot. And check out the link to our Patreon below. That'll help our channel grow, the quality of the videos get better, and then to help us run the charity events that we put on each and every year for the Children's Hospital. Every dollar helps, every contribution helps. So if you have a spare $1 or $2 a month, consider joining our Patreon. Without further ado, let's get to my number 21 favorite game of all time, brand new to the list, a brand new game for me, and from local Minnesota designer Cole Worley and Leader Games, and we're very proud of that. Arcs. One of my favorite games of all time. Number 21 here, Arcs is just fantastic. What makes Arcs fantastic, you ask? Well, again, like Brian Boru, Arcs has another spin on trick-taking with some area control, but also Arcs throws in some combat in space. In Arcs, like I said, the main actions is trick taking. So you are playing different suits of cards down onto the board, and whether or not you're leading with that suit or following that suit or playing a card of a different suit, that'll tell you what action you can do and how strong that action is going to be for your turn. You're trying to recruit more spaceships to your side of the board. You're trying to build bases, build starports, send the different spaceships around the board to vie for control of these different planets to try to gain resources and other tokens for special abilities, and you are rolling some dice to blow up your opponents. You're doing just a ton of things, but it all revolves around that simple playing of a card in trick-taking fashion. So it's a twist on trick-taking, so it's not like the old trick-taking games of the past. It's definitely not exact and identical to trick-taking, but it definitely has some tropes of that. What I really like in Arcs is that each game plays out completely different, and depending on what hand of cards you have, you're really stuck with a bad hand of cards almost every single round of this game, and you have to make do with what you have. So if you have a bad hand of cards for that round, your opponents might have better cards, or vice versa. In a future round, they might have a bad hand of cards. You might have cards that work well for you, and you just have to make do with those cards the best you can. You also have an action that you can do with some of the cards that have a specific mission type that's on it, and you can claim that mission type to have it score at the end of the round. So there are a handful of different missions that'll score you victory points, but if you don't claim a specific mission, or if your opponents don't claim a specific mission for that round, that mission type is not scoring for that round. So you're really trying to build up to these different types of missions and then trying to activate that mission type for you that'll work best for you, and that might not work as well for your opponents, and your opponents are doing the same thing, trying to activate those different mission types at the most opportune time for them. So the different mission types, a lot of fun with that. So not everything is scoring every round, which I really enjoy. The card play is a lot of fun. The different lore cards that you can buy and recruit into your tableau play area will give you special abilities and special effects that you can activate with those cards. Those cards can also be stolen from your opponents during combat or discarded, so those are being manipulated. So you're trying to protect them the best you can to keep them on your side of the board to give you those special abilities. And it's a game that can definitely fall flat with newer players and be very frustrating, but if you give it a chance, if you give it a few plays and really learn the system in and out and give it that opportunity to really come to fruition and shine and become that design that Cole meant it to be, then Arcs is a very rewarding game. It's definitely a game that shines well with playing with the same group of players each and every time that it's brought to the table, so everybody knows how to play and everybody's learning the game and progressing and getting better at the game together, and that the rising tide is rising all with one. That is the drawback in Arcs, but I really do believe that if you give it that opportunity, this game really shines, and that's why it is my number 21 favorite game of all time. Alright, and that does it for today's list. Leave comments below with some of your favorite games of all time, and I will respond back to you as quickly as I can with whether or not I think you're crazy or whether or not I think your favorite games are a good pick. Also, there are links in the show notes below to the other episodes in this Top 50 Favorite Board Games of All Time segment, where you can look at my previous videos that lead up to this one to see what my number 50 up to 41 favorite games were, and then my number 40 up to 31 before, or I guess now after viewing this video. So until next time, you all have a great day and have fun gaming.